don't serve the real core purposes of life, and to gain knowledge that is essential for equity and balance and unification. It's a time to reassess what is truly worth investing our time and energy and creativity and vision into. And no matter what anyone believes or how one worships or affirms the uniqueness of life and its purpose, we can all share in that message of this month. And to consider our future and to invest not only in our own success, but the success of other persons whose safety and security and success impacts our own. We have to find the way and sustain the experience of feeling and serving the needs of others, and to find certainty in our life's journey and our path, to understand that everything one is related to, everything one or other, everything that is unified has its impact on us. As Newton theorized in the third law of thermodynamics, he said, for every action, there's an equal action. So out of revelation comes admonitions like love thy neighbor as yourself, or do unto others as them do unto you, or want for your brother or sister what you want for yourself. And some say that value lies in what is wanted in common and therefore represents that. For example, a gold standard behind currency, or a product that trade is indexed by, like oil. But today, what we need to discover value on common unifying values. And this principle has been at the core of Legacy International's work for 4 decades. The essential values that we share must be shared in our actions and our relationship. There's a portion of a poem by Francis Thompson that reads, all things by immortal power, near and far, hiddenly to each other linked are, that unites a flower without troubling a star. That's what I welcome my dear friend Aissa Azzouzi, who is a co-founder of Legacy International's Global Transformation Corps, the founder of Global Train Africa. He will carry on and enlighten us today on a critical subject of values and value from his unique point of view. And so, for a little more formal introduction, Mary, if I've left anything out, welcome everybody.
Thank you very much for that thought-provoking intro. I'm going to put the poem portion in the chat room so people can see that. Aissa, I think people read your bio on our social media channel here. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Rash. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for offering me the opportunity to address you. And I want to thank Legacy in general for the long effort and dedication to bring us all together and try to learn from each other. So the purpose of today's discussion is to really try and bring to you some reflections and thoughts that I have developed over many years, obviously, but that I have refined more and more over the past 2 to 3 years. Before we get really into the matter, I really want to reflect on a few things that, in a way, tell me that this topic is very much related and important in the current context. I think the COVID crisis is in crisis in itself. It's a health crisis. It's an economic crisis. It has a number of impact on the economy, more importantly on people's lives. Somebody, can you mute? Thank you. So the crisis itself leads to another revelation or crisis. It's a symptom, in fact, of a number of issues that we know existed in the society and in economies before the COVID crisis emerged. And I relate that to a level of instability. We have managed to reach a level of instability in many, many respects. Climate change is as a result of instability. Economic crisis is another result of a number of other instabilities. We know from the way we live that there are a number of things. The immunity is an issue with stability or instability, etc., etc. But what this leads me to think, and how does this relate to what I'm trying to present to you, is that, and that's what interests me in this crisis, is two things. One, this reveals that what we are going to talk about today is very much a paradigm change. The biggest crisis we have to deal with is a change of paradigm, that we can't continue to operate under the current modality or system. And why that is because we know that there is a big issue between what it is that we really, as a community, as a society, as human beings, intend this life to be, and what's the purpose of everything we do. That raises that question. And I think the COVID crisis precipitates that questioning to each of us. What is it that we want to do in this world, and what's the purpose of everything we do, and what's the purpose of the different resources that we have in front of us, be it money or other resources. It also poses the questions of truth. We see every day people lying at a level which is unbelievable. They can say one thing today and the opposite the next day, and that's not a problem to them. It's a problem with truth of our leaders, with truth of business people, which creates a big damage, which is the damage of trust. If we can't trust each other, I think we can't operate further. It raises the question of transparency. Are our leaders, is the system transparent? It raises the question of governance. What is the governance mechanism to not only manage crisis, but also to manage those people that manage us, and which we have a problem now of their ethical behavior or their trust, or the trust to them. And of course, what are the values, as Mr. Rash just presented? What are the values that animate us and that animates what we do, and the business models and the operating models of our societies and communities? Is life more important than economy, or is it the other way around? And the other interesting learning for me really is, clearly we see that those countries that have a very strong governance system have done better in managing the crisis than others. Funnily enough, two opposite systems seem to be doing pretty well. A very authoritative governance system, they have been very successful in terms of managing the crisis, or very transparent governing system. The other ones, many of them, most of leadership in Europe or in the US, apparently are struggling to really deal with this crisis. And probably that's exactly illustrating what we are going to be talking about, which is, where is the truth? Where's the trust? Where are the values? Is it the power of oligopoles that is leading us, or is it values that drive our behavior? And also, ultimately, what's the accountability of these people versus the responsibility of these people? So we're going to touch on a few of these. So during my presentation, I will start with illustrating or trying to just tease you with the difference between intent and purpose. What is that? What does that mean to us? I will then go to describing different forms of capital. We think capital like money, but capital is not that. We have subsumed a lot of other intangible values or meanings or resources into money, but it's much more than that. I also want to illustrate how I think about impact, which I relate to intent. If there is the intent to deliver impact, or the intent is different, and then we just pretend to have this or that impact. Then I will illustrate how, in my paradigm change thinking, how we can design our behavior and our actions and our business models, if we operate in a business, to deliver an impact-led strategy. Then I will illustrate some of my thinking about impact tracking, impact assessment, impact measuring, and I will open the last part of my presentation to an interactive session where I would like to discuss with you what can we do, what can I do, because we is always easy to think about when we go back to us. What is it we can do as an individual? So to start with, intention versus purpose. What is an intention? Intention is a driver. It's the reason why an action is undertaken. So the premeditation, the trigger, the origin, the source, the inspiration that is driving your actions, acts, and deeds. That's the intention. And you can think about it when you move your hand, before you move your hand, you have the intention to move your hand. Otherwise, your hand doesn't move. The purpose is what you expect the outcome of your intention or your action to be. So that's what purpose is. What you get from a particular activity. So I think that's important to really dissociate the two, because you need to question your intention every time you do something, whatever that is. It's a small thing or a bigger thing. If you look at your intention, you're gonna understand in a different way what it is we're gonna be talking about in terms of how we behave as individuals and as collective, as groups in society. The next thing I want to bring to you is the way I picture this is why you act or you intend so why you act is the manifestation of your intent, and then it's a soul searching question. Why am I doing this? What is really my intention behind this? The way your mind works is how you act. What are the values that animate your actions? And your behavior and your acts are the manifestations of your values. And finally, what impact you get on people or on group of people or on society or on the environment is the manifestation of how you want to deal with the big question of sustainability and how you respect and care for others or for the environment. If you now take the view of, okay, how does that relate to societies, to organizations, to companies, then you need to also start understanding that capital is not just money. There is human capital, there is your health is a capital and also can be put at risk. You have financials and natural resources, manufactured product are also other forms of capital. Cultural capital is very fundamental. Social capital, relationship, network, all these are capital. And obviously knowledge, your psychological health, and then your psychological stability and your psychic element, and as well as your spiritual capital. These have also the nature of resources and of course capital, and they have different impact. So as you can see, they have impact on the people, or impact on making profit, or impact on the planet, and they have also, they relate again to the purpose and the intent according to which you are behaving and acting. So when, be it an individual or an organization, I really think that we have to look at what's happening whenever it happens, or whenever somebody is talking. What is the intent of this person now? Is it manifesting truth and honesty and sincerity, or is there just a narrative that is done here to satisfy whoever is satisfied with this kind of narrative. That leads to thinking about what kind of strategy, be it an organization, a company, or nonprofit organization, what is the strategy that you want to develop according to the intent of what it is you want to reach. And that requires, again, to test this strategy vis-a-vis the transparency. If a strategy or a behavior or business model or a company is not transparent, what does it say about exactly what the intention is? So the transparency delivers trust. How do you earn that trust? Are you really telling the truth, or are you just manipulating the truth or presenting it in a nice way for me to believe whatever you're trying to tell me? This transparency, this trust, and these values will then penetrate your business model or your operating model. And the way you design your business model, the way you operate, that defines how equitable, how harmonious you want to be vis-a-vis the stakeholders and vis-a-vis the environment. And you can always question that. I mean, people talk about Uber as supermodel, Uberization here, Uberization there. But when you really look into it, what does it do? It disrupts economies, it disrupts people's lives, it makes social systems explode in countries that have adopted social systems that are more equitable. That's why Uber never succeeded and is not even allowed in the Nordics, for example. It succeeded in, or difficultly succeeded in some other countries, or was pushed away because it's not harmonious. So it's not necessarily a perfect model, because it makes people become, in a way, self-employed, which is a very, very potentially interesting thing, but it also destroys the social systems that have been put in place in some countries. And therefore, the business model is going to have impact, a wide impact on people and people's lives, on economies, on communities, on the environment. How do you show that you have empathy with all these constituencies, be it individuals, animals, fauna, flora, environment? That's, again, if you have empathy, if you have this harmonious intention, then it manifests care for these people. And if you care, you then will make sure that your impact is not too negative vis-a-vis your direct environment. And finally, you will reach an impact, be it an organization or an individual. And how is that impact achieved? How much love does that impact manifest? If you care, you show your love. And if you love, you care. So this is very, I mean, this may sound esoteric in a way, but I would just like you to take it as for what it is, thought-provoking kind of scheme. Maybe nobody talks about this kind of metrics because they're not metrics. But is this something we understand as human beings? I believe intuitively this makes sense. How come we're not operating like this? We're operating in a very mechanistic way when things are more holistic, where things are more quantic than mechanistic. So I think that's the idea behind all this, how we move from this mechanistic view, very quantitative based approach, to a more qualitative based approach. So I'm not going to go too long on this one, but again, applying this very people's driven model that we just discussed to companies, you find exactly the same things. Your strategy is the manifestation of intent. So is it driven by a positive intent, driven by truth? Do you have the check and balances to make sure that the governance of your organization manages to control what the leadership is doing? These are questions one should ask. How you operate is according to your values. So do you manifest empathy? Do you manifest transparency? Do you manifest the search for harmony with your stakeholders or not? If you do, hopefully the impact will be good. If you don't, the impact will be maximizing profit for yourself in the short run and destroying a number of other constituencies and having damaging impact on the environment in the long run or in the short run. So that's, I mean, that's really a simplified view, but at the core, that's what we should be looking at when we consider doing business with somebody or doing business ourselves. How we define our intent and our strategy, how we want to operate. Does it really respect our values? And does it really manifest our intention to care about the different stakeholders? I'm going to skip this one. So this one presentation really is trying to bridge everything I just presented in a way to say, okay, what's at the core? How does that function? And what's the output or the outcome? Clearly, the pyramid is from intent to values to sustainability, as you have seen already. So what's the governance mechanism? What's the strategic intent? What's the transformation intent? We need to transform. We need to transform a number of modalities and operational models. We need truth to the stakeholders, and we need congruence between the intent and the actions. We need to revisit existing business models and operating models in light with this change of paradigm as to how we define what we want and what's the purpose of what we are doing. How we use resources in a transformative way and for a positive impact is also to be questioned and revisited. So intention of transformation, intention of really being true and saying the truth, and intention that is governed by a check and balance, that creates a trust index. The more you provide signs of this intent, the more trust we can have in you as a person or you as an organization. Values of empathy, transparency, and harmony, that will, in my view, define something which is a love index. Do you love who you are dealing with, or do you just look at them as resources or clients? Sustainability, in my view, sustainability, we talk about it in so many different ways, but it's very simple. Sustainability is what we are delivering in terms of impact on people first, because that's the most important, planet, but that's even more important because that's where we live, and society as a group. And that defines a care index. How much do you care about these constituencies? That's another presentation of this. So a purpose beyond profits, truth, integrity, accountability, that's the trust. Empathy, transparency, inclusivity, that's manifesting love, and care for people, the planet, and society. That's the other major index, which is SDG centric. And of course, one thing is to say, okay, that's good, but what can we do with this? I think we can think about this different way of looking at the world and looking at the way we operate, and we can try to learn from this, and we can teach in a different way. We can teach organizations, we can teach people, we can teach companies to align the leader's intent to the impact or to their values, obviously. We can also therefore, we can align intent and purpose, as I initially presented. We can transform business models with values. Business models are what they are. Can we revisit them and make sure they are more respectuous of a number of values and principles and the principled behavior vis-a-vis the different constituencies. And finally, we can help through this process catalyze the impact. The SDGs is a fantastic intention, ambition. It's imperative we move forward. So how do we catalyze that? How do we create the medium and the vehicles and the environment to transform societies and companies and the way we behave and the way we live to deliver these SDGs quicker than we currently are? Can we learn that? Should we focus on that? Should we teach that? I would say, yeah, we should, and it should be now, not tomorrow. So to close this this presentation, I'm working with a few friends. We had discussions with Ishrat as well on developing some sort of a new model which build on this paradigm and other line of thought to try and deliver some indices, because again, we want to be able to make this become a reality and become practical and become usable. And I would very much be interested to have your feedback. Would you like to have an index on the companies that you deal with or that you are a client of, that you say, okay, let me see, according to this strange paradigm that Aissa has been presenting, how well they perform on the trust index, love index, or care index. Oh, how can I do that? You can look at what they say, what they do, or the different reports they produce. Do they have a transformative purpose, i.e. not continue to do what we now clearly see is not necessarily something we should continue doing? Are they leading with integrity, with truth? Are they demonstrating they are accountable of what they do? It's too much, it's too often we see people do very big damage and say, oh, I didn't know, I'm not responsible, maybe somebody else is. How about the love index? I mean, these people do business with me, they take my money, but are they really just telling me that I'm important to them, or just to please me because I'm buying from them? So is it really manifesting empathy? Are they really inclusive? Are they really transparent? Are they really communicating in a way that is sincere? Are they really sharing their profit with a larger audience than just making profit and more profit? And finally, what's the care? What do they really care? Or do they just say they do, but they don't? Do they care for the planet, for people, and for societies in everything they do, from building their product to selling it, to packaging it, to delivering it? And then therefore we can measure this, this care index. And this is basically where my long speech, I hope I didn't bore you too much, will end up. It's reflecting. There is an interesting concept that a few countries are starting to work with. It's called the donut economy. It's the round thing to the left of this chart. It says, okay, what's fundamental, what's core, what's absolutely necessary for humanity to thrive? Of course, health, food, water, energy, networks, housing, gender equality, social equity, political voice, peace and justice, income and work, education. That's fundamental. We can't live without that. So that, as you can see, that's where the intent is. The intent of humanity is to reach a balance vis-a-vis these different elements. This is where social foundations happen. This is where you can define regenerative and distributive economies. This is where we feel safe and respected and considered as individuals and as a humanity. So delivering this is mandatory. That's what we should do. But over delivering this, doing things that go beyond that have impact on the oceans, that pollute, that destroy fresh water, that have an impact on land, on animals, on pollution. That's overshooting. We don't want to do that. So how can we get to the core of what it is people need to have a decent and harmonious life, vis-a-vis what it is we do that is not necessarily needed and that has a very, very big impact. So here I would like to invite you for the opening of the interaction discussion to think about, okay, I as a person, what can I do? Okay, I like or I don't like what you just presented. So if you don't like it, maybe the question you don't need to answer, but if you do, as an individual, what can you do to think about your consumption? Is my consumption, I mean, if I reflect on what I buy, what I do, we have a huge power in our hand. What we buy gives power to a company. If we decide not to buy that stuff anymore because it's not aligned with what we just discussed, maybe we have a little impact, and more people having impact on them company, we can either force them to change or we can get them out of business because we're not buying their stuff because it's too damaging. What is my own footprint? Is my behavior and are my habits aligned with my intention to create a transformation impact on people, the planet, and prosperity, or not? Am I carrying a proper assessment of my own personal footprint? And then we as individuals or as organizations, we also have we deal with finance, we deal with money, we can't escape that. So what is my active finance behavior? Are my investment aligned with my intention to influence system change and transformative societies? Is the budget of my country aligned with this intention? We can challenge our politicians to reflect and see whether they're doing what is at the core here, or they are overshooting because they are spending money in other things which are not necessarily needed. How can I invest myself to sustain the SDG and drive system change? And what is my passive finance? We all have passive finance. We all contribute to saving schemes or pension schemes or whatever. Where is that money put? And when you look at it, then you start to realize that pension schemes are invested in nasty business. Is that what I want? No. How can I influence that? So I will pause here and really open for your feedback, questions, and the debate amongst ourselves.
Thank you, Aissa. So if you have a question, just feel free to unmute and introduce yourself and where you're from and ask that question. I think we'll start with questions. And that was great content. So maybe some people have some questions first, and then we can go back to these great questions you've asked us. Anybody?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Aissa. Hello, this is Badr speaking.
Hi.
Hey. So, hello, everyone. I'm Badr Bouslama. I'm from Morocco. I'm PFP alumni 2018 Economic Empowerment with Legacy International. I had the chance to meet Mr. Aissa on the last day of my PFP experience, as now as I'm working with him on as a, I won't say a team member, but as a student for the GTA.
No, as a team member, come on, don't be shy. As a team member.
As a team member. Okay, as a team member in the GTI. So and we've been discussing, and this is something that we discuss most of the time, the impact and the intent. It's very good to have this way of reflection about the universe, the way of reflection about our way of living, because it doesn't just put us in harmony with the world, but it puts us in harmony with ourselves. We live in what we know a deep self-satisfaction. I came to understand that most people are looking for self-satisfaction, and most of the time we're trying to avoid feeling regret. And with this type of reflection of work, I believe we can live in a deep self-satisfaction instead of regret. The problem is, and the question that I would like to say is that we live in a world, we live with people, we interact with this universe, we communicate, we benefit from as we help, as we impact that universe. So, which means that this universe and this way of reflection, it has to be received from the external environment. And regarding the local circumstances, regarding the crisis in which that we are living right now, and I would say that the best part about this crisis is that they reveal the truth behind. They allow the masks to fall down. They allow us to see what we really are and how do we really think. And one of the things that were manifested the most in Morocco is that what I came to understand is that most people are self-centered and greed and selfish. And for that, I would like to share with you a story about a leader, a governor in Yemen. He used to know as a great general who had a great war skills, and he decided to see how much his community will collaborate in time of crisis. So what he decided is that he told them that we are going to face a war, and I would like to ask each one of you to each day to give just a spoon of honey each day in this, and he bring a big barrel and told them just a spoon of honey each day for a week in this barrel so that we can have enough supplies for the militaries. And one of the people said that I cannot give a spoon of honey each day because this spoon I use it for breakfast. So I will change the spoon with water, and this small amount of water we won't see it in in the big barrel of honey, so people won't notice. 1 week after the campaign, the leader came. He bring the water, he bring a cannon, and he shot the barrel in front of everyone, and he was full of water. Everyone thought the same way. Everyone thought with greed. So So the leader had a good reflection between his impact and his intention, but the world with whom who was going to apply this way of reflection did not receive this. So you can see that that was the result. So that would lead to my question: how can I deploy, and how can I make sure that this way of thinking, this way of reflection, it's really something that when I'm going to live with it in the world will receive it the way it is, and it won't reject it. Because you see, when it comes to reject, we came to understand that we live in a real crisis. That's my question. Thank you.
That's thank you, Bal. Yeah, I really, the more I think about it, the more I realize the challenge is first individual. It's always is. We can't expect to have something being the way we want it to be before we are sure that we are into an introspection. That's why this whole presentation started with the intent. The intent is not something abstract. It's in you. It's not something you expect to come from the outside. And again, of course, such concepts and such paradigms is defeated very often because people behave differently to that. But how can you get to the change that is needed except by starting yourself? And that's where we should focus. It's too easy to blame others and to blame the circumstances and we can't do this or we can't do, it's too complex. Yeah, it's really complex. That's for sure. But by really thinking and observing the intent, and by understanding that it comes from within you and then it expands, I think that's where the whole idea of having a positive impact starts. And then it accumulates with the demonstration that it's the way forward. Because I really think that intuitively we all know what it is that is respectful to nature. You go to nature and you don't start cutting trees, you respect them. You don't start cutting flowers, you look at them and you admire their beauty. So yeah, I think that it unfortunately human history has showed us that the only way for human beings to learn, if they do, is through crisis. Because there is this Greek word of catharsis. The crisis is a moment that is needed, so that then we can eliminate the nature or the source of the crisis, if we are again honest with it and not try to find a scapegoat that is to be blamed for whatever crisis. But if we are honest about any crisis, again, we look at the crisis, we expurge from ourselves, we remove from ourselves the roots or the origin of that crisis to go through the catharsis of transformation. And I believe that the other kind of strange benefit, if we can call this a benefit, but there is always something good and something bad, that allowing us through this confinement period to really get into introspection, I'm hopeful that at least it will trigger questions into people more and more. And it will then help formulate the answers that we together can contribute to something better. I keep being optimistic about it.
If I might play off of that to a bit, the question, I think that For those of us who are familiar with some Arabic sayings, and we find that the concept that was put out by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that actions follow intentions, which is a great part of what you're saying today. I think there are two things that we have to consider, and as you know, I totally agree with you. It's a beautiful presentation. Thank you very much for it. As you know, as I know that you know that I know that it's a wonderful translation of many deeper concepts. One is that I'm not so sure there isn't a juxtaposition between intention and care, because you have to care before you make an intention. There has to be a values base for that intention. So in a sense, it starts before intention. And when we look at the world that Sidi Badr was talking about, that we have to understand also where we really are, as opposed to the optimal situation. As you know, I've said in my earlier times that we're wired for compassion and mercy and love and peace and tolerance. The Azzouzi Husna, we're hardwired for that. But how do we access it? And the reality of the greed that you refer to, and the authoritarianism, and what works and what doesn't work in this world today, leads us to think about how can we think about unlearning. If you want to learn something new or change a paradigm, then right now we're faced with a situation of unlearning. And that's a three-part process. If you unlearn, you have to there has to be a methodology for unlearning. Then you have to learn how to learn. And then you can learn. And after that, you can, somewhere in that process, you can make an intention that projects what you have learned, that gnosis, that marifa, into the world in very practical ways, as we call it practical idealism. We put it in very practical ways. So I think that methodology there is very important. As you said, at times of crisis, people have an opportunity, but how to seize that moment, that waqt, how do you seize that moment and into an opportunity goes back to a kind of receptivity to change your methodology, your training, your process. And we have to address that process along with all of this. So, otherwise what we're going to find ourselves is we're going to be, and it's a good thing, that we're going to find ourselves dealing with people who already either have some process or they are aligned with our intention, or your intention, which we share. That's wonderful. That's a whole cadre of people that are aligned with it that we can mobilize and for the good. But the people whose lives are so complex, in such an entanglement, refugees who don't have food on the table, but are people who are at war, people who are ill right now with COVID, and whose minds are affected by it. How do we have to address the methodology that gives them the space to do all of this that we know is absolutely, and you have presented in a beautiful way, is absolutely necessary for transformation and what I call regeneration, reunion with each other, because we all are hardwired for the same things. So I think we have to make some effort to describe, I wouldn't call it the negative, but the circumstances that lead to it and the methodology that people can accept.
Thank you for that exchange. Aissa, can you stop share screen so that we can all better see each other?
Sure,
And is there anyone else who has a question or comment or thought they'd like to throw out to the group? So you just stop your share screen. There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yvonne, go ahead.
So thank you for that beautiful presentation, Aissa. It was really very inspiring. And I see the grandeur of the vision and look at the immediacy of the world that we are a part of today. I look at this coronavirus, as you also pointed out, the good and the bad, the good being that it has put us in this stop where we can reflect and reevaluate what's really important and maybe even remember what's really important. My question is, what's the tiny little steps that we take to move towards that grander vision now in this situation, that we can reach out to people and discover the like-mindedness? And just as an addition, because I think the same way, I find myself interacting with many people who think this way. But from the idea to the reality, how do we close that gap?
Thank you for that question. Challenging question. The best answer I would think of, and I'm sure Mr. Rash will add something to it. He's got, I'm sure he's got a perspective on this one. But for me, what this tells me is self-observance and raising awareness of what it is that is happening is probably the immediate impact of this COVID crisis. People have really had to stop doing things that they are used to do as a routine. They were not questioning themselves every day. They jumped in their car, they went to work. We all get entangled into some form of routine that distantiates us a lot from, alienates even us from our real self, and puts us into doing things mechanically without questioning it, because it's difficult to question yourself every day. So one thing which I hope this crisis helps doing is questioning. At least the first thing is really questioning what's going on. Is this really what I wanted? Is this what we as a collective want? What's the purpose of my life? And then what is it that we need to reassess in terms of, do we really need all this? So the first thing that I think everybody could do, in my chart, I said, what can I do? Consumption. That's the thing we control best. We can decide what it is we want to buy or not buy. And we see companies going bankrupt one after the other. Not that it's good that they go bankrupt. I don't want that to happen to anybody. But what is it saying? It says that some things that are happening today are either we can't travel anymore, and all the airlines companies are in trouble because we're not traveling. But do we need to travel that much? I see rental cars are going bankrupt. Do we need to rent cars that much? Can we travel otherwise? Stores are going bankrupt. Do we need to buy all this stuff? So we do have a lot of power in our hands, more than we think. And at least for me, if I may say so, it's questioning, self-observance, becoming a little bit more aware of what it is we do and what we contribute to, without knowing, because sometimes we don't even think about it, but at least questioning that and revisiting that and reassessing that, we can see that we do have a lot of power. We do have a lot of power. We can change things by deciding how we want to consume, whether we want to buy this or not, how we want to challenge our political constituencies to say, look at what Denmark is doing. These people are serious about it. They are serious about the SDGs. Why? Because they have an immediate impact. If the water of the level of oceans go up, they are in big trouble. So their political system, their policies, their tax systems is totally coherent. So the other really thing is coherence. You want this, be coherent. They don't want they do it at the scale. They are only 5 million. They could say we can do nothing. We are just 5 million people amongst the 7+ billion. we can't do anything. Well, we'll just have to live with it. No, at their level, they have decided that every minister is in charge of SDGs. They have to report to their people about how the government is doing vis-a-vis the SDGs. They have put together a fund, a social impact fund that supports the SDGs. Their tax system is totally coherent. Cars are taxed 250%, 250% taxation on cars. They don't want people to have cars. They want people to be on the bikes. So ultimately, what happened? People on bikes, are they happy? Be it rain or snow or what, they travel with a bike and they're happy. They say so. And they have the lowest rate of obesity in the world. Is there a correlation between? Probably, etc., etc. So that would be my answer.
Hi,
You
Aissa.
invited a comment. You invited a comment, and I'll make a comment if I might briefly, which is that I totally agree with you. We live in too much of an ease economy. And consequently, the ancient teaching, inama usra yusra, inama usra yusra, for with hardship go with ease, with hardship go with ease, we turn it around, hardship also. And so I think that it's very important to say, because why does somebody like Donald Trump want the economy to come back right away? Why is he condemning people to death that won't have to die in order to get the economy back? And the answer is quite simple, and which you have mentioned, which basically that people will feel the impact if they can't come back to an ease economy. If they cannot get things shipped from across the United States, if the things that they get every day don't arrive in their doorstep whenever they want it will impact on their life. And when it impacts on their life, he won't be elected again. It's a terrible situation, and it's a triage situation where he is saying, well, these people will die just so elected. And this is typical of the authoritarianism that you mentioned at the very beginning. Do what they're told in an authoritarian regime, but at the same time, the motivation is very, very selfish. So and then going back, this is about. You have to reflect on ourselves. And so how do you do that? You have to keep asking that question, why? Why? Why am I buying what I'm buying? Why I call it the 5 whys, and keep asking that question. Why do I have to feel, why do I feel that I have to have this? Why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? And definitely this all begins with introspection. And so here we are. We're from a spiritual point of view, we're at a place which has happened over millenniums, that something happens, some prophetic individual comes in some way, some revelation comes, however you want to talk about it, and tells people, look, why did this happen? Why are you thinking the way you're thinking? And this is the transformative methodology that we've tried to live by a legacy for over 40 years, and which is so beautifully presented today. Thank you. Bernie, I think you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say thanks so much for your presentation, and just wanted to sort of bring up a thought. Might be kind of a question, maybe an idea, because it does seem like there are, people out there who are purely selfishly motivated, but then there are a whole lot of people out there that I think have really good intentions, but they'll do a kind of expediency trade-off, either between the goals, like we have to sacrifice today to get something tomorrow, or they'll sacrifice one, the benefits of one for one population for another, or just thinking about like the pharmaceutical corporations, we may sacrifice animal rights and the environment, but we're saving lives. So there's that sort of population in between where I think they may have positive intentions, but it's like they're doing this trade-off thing that's happening. And I wonder if you have any comments about that.
Yeah. I would I would tend to think that um, of course these kind of trade-offs can appear. I'm trying to think whether you do have whether it's a way of thinking that we think that way, that we have to sacrifice this for the benefit of that. I really believe sincerely that we can do things more harmoniously because that's what we see. We see nature behaves in an harmonious way. I heard recently that when a tree grows, it cares for other trees. It leaves the space for others to have the light they need. So the tree wants to grow, but it doesn't do it at the expense of others. It can't kill its environment to grow. So can we heal people without testing on animals or without damaging the environment? I'm not a specialist of medicine development, but I know that people have been healing other with using what's available in nature. By the way, everything that we use is somewhere in nature. Some people are trying to even patent a plant that is in India or in Africa for their benefit. Why do they do that? And then they kind of develop the narrative that plants are not that good. They need to be sophisticated with some chemistry, etc., to be better. It's not true. It's just a narrative. So I think that's why I started to say that we need to reset our thinking. We need to think different. It's difficult. It's challenging, but it's difficult to think different because we tend to think in a certain way. We've been educated to think that way. But I will challenge the view that we have to do damages to do things. And I would even say, if you do something that damages, maybe you should not do it.
Thank you.
Okay. So Ishrat had a question or a comment.
Yes. Okay. All right. So to carry on with what Bernie just said, the discussion was just, I'll talk about that a little bit and then I'll come to a relevant question. So what you're saying, Bernie, is the question of trade-offs, right? So sometimes we find ourselves in situations where if we give one stakeholder something, the other stakeholder comes down. In the talk that I gave a few weeks ago, I said that those are our opportunity points for innovation. Conflicts between stakeholders and conflicts between dimensions. I presented something. So if we are not finding a solution that creates more value for both parties that are in conflict, we're not doing our job. So either in your organization, if you find yourself in that kind of a situation, either you solve that problem or that problem will be solved for you by your competitor. When a new stakeholder system will come up and your stakeholders will jump ship. So that is what has been happening. So it's a question of trade-off, and trade-offs are opportunities. So just wanted to address that, hearing what you said. In terms of the overall presentation, thank you very much, Aissa, for a wonderful presentation. It's truly inspirational, from intent to impact, and there in the middle way, where it's the harmonious part where we should be. Not too much of this, not too little of that. That was fantastic. So this is a vision for the future. A future which may not come in our lifetimes. Okay, so this is something that may happen for everyone. It may happen really far away. What I would like to know from you, or perhaps you could focus on, is just like you talked about Denmark, talk about an industry in Morocco that you're going to change next. It has to do with the process of, similarities with building intentional communities such as World Community in Bedford, right? I would bet that if you look at that community and if you try to think from an outside's perspective, the impact it has on those outer things, the environment and all of that, the consumption that goes in there, there is a balance.
right? So if you think in just in terms of that community, that world community that has been there, and its intention, it's an intentional community. It's an intentional community, and the impact it has, you see that not, not overextending. So with all that you have said, fantastic. What I'd like to hear from you, maybe not today, but maybe in the next time we talk, that, okay, Denmark has done it intentionally. What are we going to do in Morocco in this industry where we change that everyone is going to follow, the care index, the trust index, or whatever. So making it manageable, and then one industry by industry, community by community, company by company, rather than putting everyone, so I think that's where this thing needs to go. Target one industry, transform that, and then, copy it from industry to industry, if possible. Because all the indexes, the matrices that you're developing, those will be different from context to context. So how you measure the pharmaceutical industry is going to be very different from how you measure the entertainment industry or the tourism industry. The metrics, the measurements will be different. So, pick one, small, manageable, transform that, go to another one. So industry-specific index, perhaps, is something what I'm talking about.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ishrat. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the suggestion. Makes a lot of sense. So I think along this line, and as I'm working with entrepreneurs, that's part of the process we're going through. I want people to think about this approach or this kind of model. So as I said earlier, I don't know if you heard it, but we, as part of the process, we have a prize that will be delivered to the entrepreneur that has the more transformative approach to its environment, to its stakeholder, to its. So I want to trigger that sort of thought process into entrepreneurs' mind to say, my project can be a project, or it can be a project that also contributes to transformation of a community, transformation of an industry. I want really people to think about the relationship between their intent in doing what they do and the impact. So in the process of running this accelerator, I want to use that as a lab to also experiment with entrepreneurs, and maybe we can look at, I have a few sectors of industry represented. We can get to something close to what you've been suggesting, but I would very much like also to continue our discussion on that. That would be fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
So we have about maybe 8 or 10 more minutes left of the formal session. If there's anyone that has a question or a comment that you feel more comfortable writing in the chat, feel free. Or if anybody has anything they'd like to say, let me know. Just start speaking.
Hello.
Hi, Tracy.
Nice to see you all. I'm thinking about if you can apply this vision that you have, especially to sustainable agriculture, or prioritizing those companies that have in some way been involved in essential needs for the human race. I think sustainable agriculture is a huge one right now.
Well, I'm tempted to think, but as Ishrat just mentioned, there is definitely testing and probing and prototyping this approach to different sectors and different industries. Whether I intuitively, again, I'm thinking this applies to many things. Does it apply well to other things? Does it have to be amended or fine-tuned to look at different sectors, different industries, different part of the economy? I'm sure. So only by testing it and by tinkering with different people, different industries, will we fine tune that? So that's part of the process. I really I'm in the process of thinking how we develop this kind of thinking into a tool or into a system or an app, and that will be hopefully proven or will need to be amended according to whatever will contradict the initial thought.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I think Elizabeth Myers, do you have something you want to ask? You might be muted, so. Elizabeth, are you there? Okay. Anybody else? Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Mary, do you have Elizabeth's question? I think she had something.
Okay, she is unmuted now. Elizabeth?
Oh, okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. I'm sorry I joined this late and have missed most of the presentation, but I am aware of the subject matter, and I'm sure it was excellent, Aissa. I did want to pose a question, though, that may be similar to one of the ones I just heard, but it's not exactly the same. It's really because the message of transformation, and especially when you talk about love, really falls deaf on corporate ears. And even in the midst of this pandemic, where we've had more than 70,000 deaths in the United States, we still, and I read something this morning in an investment management brokerage email that I get periodically, how do we get back to normal? Well, we're never going to be back to normal, and we don't want to be back to normal, frankly, in my opinion. So my question really is, how do we get through to the corporations and the corporate CEOs to really recognize, one, that the world has changed and there's no going back to normal markets, free markets. And plus, full disclosure here, I'm a regulatory lawyer. I believe in regulated markets and regulated companies. I've dealt with them for my 25-year legal career, and corporations are pretty much out of control. How do we get them at this juncture? How do we take advantage of COVID-19 to get them to change their cutthroat approach to the corporate environment, to doing business, to hiring and firing people, to toxifying the environment? How do we do this? And I'm saying this because I want to do it. I want to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your feedback, and thank you for the question. I see two ways. One immediate one, which is really, as we touched upon a little bit, consumption. We have a tremendous power in our hands to say, no, I don't want that. I don't need it. I don't buy it. It's not good. It's not good for me. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for my children. We have that choice. It's funnily enough, for some reason, people are struggling with making these choices. There are many, many things we don't need. I mean, unfortunately, 60 plus years of heavy marketing and advertisement have brainwashed us, really literally, that you have to think twice before you say, do I really need that? So questioning that kind of habit of consuming and saying, well, I have power in my hands, I buy it or I don't buy it. If more and more people don't buy it, then less and less this company is needed. The other thing which I'm a firm believer of is, beyond democracy, there is I think we are really at the point of heavy challenge of democracies. They apparently something is wrong. What is wrong is transparency and governance. So and that's not an easy one. I don't know how we get there, but how we get a governance of people that lead, be it entrepreneurs, be it companies, corporate, and our own governments. How do we manage to find a counter balance to the power that these people have collided to get together so that there is a better representation of other views and other thought, and dismantle this very corrupt way of doing business and of colliding with politicians, to create a mechanism of a different governance in different societies, because clearly that's what's failing. We don't have control of these people. The people that advise governments, or are those leaders or those companies that do harmful things. How do we manage to dissociate politics and business is the big question. I don't have the answer, but for me, on one side, consumption, on the other side, forcing more transparency and governance. And that's really what this COVID-19 crisis has revealed, is people have been lying, and now they can't lie anymore. And then everybody is challenged because it's visible. So, and those countries that have best managed the crisis have a tradition of transparency, have a better governance mechanism, have found a better equilibrium between the different stakeholders to behave in a way which is not too corrupt. I would say that's the best answer I can give. I don't know if that answers you, but that's the two fronts on which I think we can do something.
This has really been a very thoughtful and thought-provoking discussion. I thank you, Aissa, for even taking this concept and putting it into a framework that you are leading your life by and inspiring others to do something. I wanted to, before we, I just wanted to say that what we're going to do is sort of formally let Mr. Ash end this session today, and then we'll leave the chat room open for another 20 minutes or so people can feel free to stay. But go ahead, Mr. Ash.
Well, this is indeed, it has been a very thought-provoking conversation, and thank you very much. The questions that were raised and the challenges that have been presented are grave, and I think that we do ourselves a disservice if we don't admit the gravity of the situations that we're in. I'm not so sure that that the COVID-19 has woken up enough people. I think another warning that comes from the earth, and as you've heard me say, it's sort of the zombie apocalypse, because this non-living thing kills human beings and consumes them. And so what some of us see is, unfortunately, the makings of a real revolution and conflict, more conflict. And we have been working for decades to avoid that, but to avoid something, you have to see its imminence. And unfortunately, addressing to some degree Elizabeth's questions and Aissa's comments, that it's going to take more than even COVID-19, I'm afraid, to wake up the people who are wielding so much power. And in a country like ours, in the United States, that has a real, the image of that is quite disturbing. Learning from others who have been successful, of course, is the best thing that we can do. And application of wonderful concepts and ideas and beliefs is what will lead us out eventually out of this morass. But I think we have to be honest and see how grave the situation truly is. You know, as I said before, the Prophet Muhammad said, if you know the end of the world is tomorrow, plant a tree today. So we're planting the trees today, and we're hoping that the end of the world is not tomorrow. And I don't want to be negative in any sense, but just to be realistic. And so when Aissa draws our attention to what I can do as an individual, what decisions I am making, it's very important about consumerism, about nature. Yes, we don't see, I'm sitting here looking at the forest, and I show you the forest. And you don't see that, and I use this example also, that you don't see the trees competing with each other. I used to talk about the light, and they are coexisting. But we have consciousness of a different kind. We have choice. There's a saying in the Middle East that when the camel driver beats his camel with his stick, the camel doesn't go after the stick, it goes after the camel driver. And the interpretation of that is that human beings have choice. The camel driver could choose not to beat his camel. The camel recognizes that the responsibility lies with the camel driver, not the stick. And so I'll sort of leave you with that thought as we go on and we try day in and day out to do the work that we do internally and externally. And we try very hard to serve one another and do it in practical ways. So let's keep doing that. Let's understand what transparency is. Let's understand what collaboration is. Let's not talk about the inner. Let's spend time inwardly with ourselves. Don't let even the good work take you away from the inner work. You know yourself and you'll know your Lord. And when we can do that and find that mizan, that harmony and that balance, then we'll understand why the middle path is the best path. And we will have practical examples on how to prove it. The proof of the concept. We have to prove the concept. And to make it economically and financially beneficial to those people who are motivated by that, but also have compassion and love and in their hearts, and that's what we have to appeal to. So thank you very much. I think we're going to leave it open for a little while for just some chatting, are we? And thank you, Aissa. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And if you know that people who would like to hear this presentation, it'll be posted. Teresa, I think, or Bertie will be posting it as soon as possible. It was a wonderful time, and Ramadan Kareem to those of you who are joining us in that endeavor, and may the blessings come to you in Alf Azmiyat, thousand times.
Oh, I think you're muted, Mary.
We'd like to take a picture too, so go ahead if you are not on screen right now and want to show your video or your face or your profile photo or something, please do so, because that always makes our picture funner. And Teresa will give us a countdown.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and take a screenshot of everyone. If you want a thumbs up or wave, I'll give you a countdown. 3, 2, 1.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
People are welcome to stay if you'd like. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. Next week, our topic is, Bernie?
Sure, let me screen share 1 second. I will show you. All right, here we go. Can you see that all right?
Yes.
Service and exploration with Maurice Bassett. And then we have more coming for Motivation May. Next up with Noe, after that is Forgotten and Misunderstood, Understanding Youth Agency in Conflict Environments. And then we have Alona the following Thursday, Collaboration, A Journey from You to We.
Right. They all flow nicely after this session that we've had today. So yeah, feel free to stay and chat, introduce yourself, talk, whatever you want to do.
Hey, Elizabeth and everyone also. if I may. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
you're good.
Yeah. So there was a book by, just wanted to share a book by a law professor, which might help anyone who hasn't read that yet. It's called The Shareholder Value Myth, Investors, Corporations, and the Public. And it's a 2012 book, but I just signed. This is a wonderful book to read if you're, if you're thinking about how firms and laws and how we think about firms, and thinking about firms as an independent entity, how that firms are. We don't think of firms as a device. We think of firms as a separate entity that has its own rights, and so it's a wonderful book. I just wanted to share for those who want to read.
Thanks.
She's a professor, law professor. She was a law professor at Cornell, but it's a great read.
Cool.
I had a comment.
Yeah, please go.
Aissa, thank you very much for this presentation. I found it very inspiring. And one of my thoughts was, I know that there is some movement, and I'm fairly naive about the whole thing, but there are certain investors like the Blackstone Group that are switching their criteria for investment. And it's away from stockholder profits to helping the employees and more sustainability. And I think if